It's science.
Just introduce more awareness around your mindset, like just to pay more attention, because just sort of like I was talking about before, when it comes to people wanting to change their lifestyles or start a diet or whatever it may be, and they only focus on the food and the exercise, like there's so much more to it when it comes to your mindset and how that can trip you up down the line or support you if you have it in the right spot. So, but how do we do that? You have to start by just like more attention. Typically I like to say, like, don't even try to change your mindset right away. Just start to pay more attention to your mindset.
Science. Science. It's science.
Welcome to Consistency Breeds Growth Radio. I am your host, Justin Romare. Our incredible guest and myself talk about the cutting-edge science and consistency necessary to reach your weight loss, wellness, and performance goals. If you have nutrition goals, we have customized nutrition programs and coaches that tell you how much, when, and what to eat for every single meal. And the best part? You don't need to calculate macros in an app. Ditch the calculators. Want to learn more about our intrinsic diet? Let one of our coaches know you listen to this podcast to get 10% off. Do you own a gym or attend a gym that wants to make some money and throw a top-notch nutrition challenge with a team of certified nutrition coaches? Our team will guide your members through a nutrition challenge customized for your gym. And you'll make money for each member who signs up. If you want more information about working with us one-on-one or in a gym setting, head over to consistencybreedsgrowth.com or email us at consistencybreedsgrowth@gmail.com. We will also put links in the show notes. Enjoy the podcast.
Science.
What's up, CBG Tribe? It's Justin Romare, your host, back here for another episode of CBG Radio. This month we have a special challenge going on. It's a mini nutrition challenge like we do every month, and it's all around sleep. If you want to join this challenge, you have to join our free Facebook page. And the only way to do this is by going to www.facebook.com/groups/CBG Nutrition Tribe. More importantly, we have an amazing guest today on the podcast. Her name is Kasey Orvidas. She has her PhD in psychology and is a certified health and fitness coach. Her expertise is all around mindset and health behavior change. She's transformed hundreds of lives and minds in her coaching career, and while also being published in multiple peer-reviewed scientific journals for her research, where she explores the relationship between mindset and our health and fitness behaviors. So, Kasey, what's going on?
Hey, I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. I know we chatted briefly on Clubhouse and got to know each other a little bit and sort of found a connection to bring you onto the podcast, which is super awesome. Mindset is definitely not my expertise, which is why I love that you're on the podcast today, and I can sort of plug some questions in for you and some of our listeners on how to improve mindset. But first, I want to know a little bit about you. So, obviously, we all have our own, training structure that we do, our nutrition and things like that. And I think it's good to hear from the coaches as to what they do on a daily basis to reach levels of success. So what is your fitness routine right now? What is your nutrition routine right now? What does that look like for you?
Good question. I don't usually get asked about my own health and fitness goals and things like that. So actually, it's funny you should ask, because I'm about 1 week into competition prep. So I am planning to compete at sort of mid-year and closer to the end of the year this year, 2021 for those of you who are listening to me later on. And it's my first competition. I'm planning to do a natural figure show, actually. So I'm super excited for that. It's been something that's kind of been in the back of my head since 2014, and have been pretty much working my butt off to build some muscle since then. I'm 1 weekend still eating plenty of food, not doing horrendous amounts of cardio or anything like that. So that's kind of my main focus right now. Prior to that, I was kind of going through more of, I guess we can call it a bulking phase. I don't necessarily like that term, but more or less focusing on muscle building for almost a year. I'm excited to sort of switch gears into more focus on fat loss rather than building for a period of time.
Yeah. We put out a podcast maybe, 3 or 4 episodes ago about what's harder, building muscle mass or losing body fat. I went through the different mechanisms of why it's so much harder to build muscle mass, and how it's just the best metabolic currency we can have. And I think your fat loss journey, now that you've sort of built that muscle mass, is going to be a little bit easier than, when you had less muscle mass, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I took a lot of time off in between without even touching a caloric deficit. So
yeah, so you're ready. You're you're mentally, your mindset, your physiology is ready for another dieting phase, hopefully.
Exactly. Yep.
I love that. Yeah. Awesome. So first I'd like to start by sort of defining like why mindset is so important, and then we can kind of get into like, since it is so important and why it's so important, where does it rank in terms of like your hierarchy in terms of fat loss?
Yeah, definitely. So it is important because it basically drives everything that you do. So it's funny because I do feel like mindset has become super popularized recently, probably in the last few years. And I have this like in my Instagram bio that I've been researching mindset before it like got cool on Instagram. But it's definitely important. It's sort of like the lens that we take to see the world, make sense of things, assign meaning to things, all of that stuff, which essentially can guide your thoughts, your feelings, and your action, which we all know when it comes to health and fitness goals, it requires like a lot of action. And a lot of times there's a lot of thoughts and feelings involved, for better or for worse. So your mindset kind of guides all of that stuff, for lack of a better kind of definition there. So it's funny because you had asked me, we're on Clubhouse previously, sort of about the hierarchy, and if I had a pyramid, like where would I place mindset? And I actually shared that pyramid yesterday on Instagram. I was like, Justin asked me about this, and it's been a while since I've posted about the good old pyramid, and people love pyramids on Instagram for whatever reason. That post always does well. So I've shared that multiple times at this point. But mindset really is at the foundation, which I'm sure most of you hearing sort of my background and everything are not surprised that I'm saying like mindset's like the most important. But I think it's often an issue because people go into their health and fitness journeys and mainly focus on exercise and food and how little should I be eating, what types of food should I be eating, how often should I be going to the gym, what types of exercises should I be doing, when they're not spending any time touching on their mindset or kind of just like where their head's at with everything. Like you were just saying with me going into a diet, like I'm mentally ready to go into a diet because I spent so much time not dieting. And I think it's really important prior to going into any sort of like diet phase, or honestly, if you're building muscle or just like trying to build a healthier lifestyle, to check in with yourself, check in with your mindset and see where you're at first. But most people don't do that. It's just like, okay, what meal plan should I follow? What exercise program should I follow? But the issue when that happens that most people run into is that when they start with those things, when they get tripped up by sort of like obstacles or challenges or something comes up that makes it difficult for them to stick to that meal plan or get to the gym, then a lot of times what can happen is the, all or nothing feelings or like the what the hell effect. These are things that are all talked about actually in the research around behavior change too. So they don't have, that mindset in place to kind of help them push through or keep going or adjust the course or do what they need to do in order to continue to pursue their goals. So they don't have that. So what happens, a lot of times, you fall off the wagon or whatever phrase you want to use, you give up for a period of time and then you try to start again. And then it just becomes this like roller coaster of trying and failing and trying and failing. And honestly, a lot of the times not even learning a whole lot along the way because your mindset's not in the right place. Instead of seeing these like setbacks and failures as an opportunity to better understand what works for you and what doesn't, or what you may need to adjust or what strategies you might need to try instead, you see those setbacks, challenges, failures, obstacles, whatever they may be, as essentially just evidence that you're not capable of doing it, that you're just like not cut out for it, that you just can't make it happen. And that's unfortunate because it really is a learning opportunity, those kind of setbacks, to, like I said, like reroute or do things differently so you can be successful next time. So I hope that kind of like paints a picture of why mindset is important when it comes to health and fitness goals. And I think for the most part, people know that it is to some degree. It's just like, but how do we work on it? How do we get better with it? How do we keep ourselves from kind of like doing this like roller coaster and having those setbacks and not learning from them?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love that it's a part of the nutrition pyramid, the weight loss pyramid, and it's sort of developed over the last couple of years. I'm wondering from you, like, okay, so we have, like, if someone's mindset is not in a good place, right? So let's say that they don't have high self-efficacy, they don't believe that they can do it, right? Is this more of a behavioral-based thing? So for example, like, if they don't believe they can do it, they're likely to steer off the path and not be able to provide clean slates for themselves if they mess up? Or is there a physiological component to this, like a placebo or nocebo effect from actually having a mindset that doesn't actually believe that it's capable is the body not matching up with the mind in a way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I do think it's a little bit of both. And there's actually an argument, it's not even an argument, it's actual research out there that does support that essentially the placebo effect is your mindset at work. So if you think about it, with just like from a very basic definition of like when we think about placebo effect, it's like you get like the sugar pill or you get the pill that has whatever drug in it, right? You give the people the sugar pill, but if you explain to them like all of the things it's going to do for them or the side effects that they might have or whatever, a lot of times those people with the sugar pill still experience those things, even though they didn't get the drug, right? So that's the placebo effect. So what's happening there or how is it that people who got something that doesn't even have a drug in it still like experience some of these effects? And the argument is like, this is your mindset at work. It's your belief. In this case, it technically is like a growth mindset. Like you're believing in your ability to experience these things, that you think that you're like, or you feel strongly that your body is going to do these things. So you experience them. So it's interesting. You should say that, like, is it that, or is it just like your kind of like your mind at work and your thought process? And it's honestly the same thing. It's so deeply intertwined that you're essentially talking about the same things, because your thoughts are going to kind of steer the direction of your physiological responses. We see that all the time. Like that's what stress is. Like literally exactly what stress is. It's entirely perceived. So if you're feeling stressed or anxious about a situation, it's because you have assigned meaning to that situation and decided it is stressful, and your body then acts accordingly, raising your cortisol levels, which is a hormone response. You may like start to like your heart rate may start to increase. You may have like sweaty palms, or not be able to speak clearly, like things like that. It'll come like nervousness, anxiety, like high stress situations. Like that's all stemming from your thoughts. So the answer is like both, and they can't really be teased apart. And this is like the idea of how, and perhaps what you were trying to get me to come to in the first place. It's not necessarily one or the other, but your mind and your body literally work so closely in tandem that you can't say like, oh, it's just your thoughts, or oh, it's just your physiological responses, because they're pretty much the same thing.
Right. Yeah. So at least we know, regardless, that mindset's super important for, being able to reach your goals and things like that. I've also heard of like a nocebo effect, where it's like, okay, sir, here's a pill. This pill does not have any, any type of drug in it that's going to provide any benefit for you or whatever, for whatever it is that you're currently experiencing. And they take the pill and they still somehow experience benefits that the actual drug would have presented. So the mind is like such a powerful thing, right?
Wild, right?
Yeah, pretty insane. So when it comes to some of these mindset tools and providing practical tips, I think it's important to provide like an assessment-based tool that people can kind of use to say, okay, like my mindset isn't where it needs to be right now for weight loss, or it actually is, and I'm ready to start my journey, so that I can either work with a coach or, get, buy a program, whatever it might be. So when it comes to a growth versus fixed mindset, what are some examples that people can kind of take themselves through to see if they're ready for an actual weight loss journey?
Yeah, that's a great question too. You just have so many good ones. So, and also it's funny that you say this, because I'm actually currently working on like a true like mindset tool, like some sort of like quiz or assessment that people can work through to see kind of where their health and fitness mindset is at. So it's sort of a combination of true like assessment scales that we use in the research, and just kind of like my experience and my own research and time in the field. So I'm working on that. So like to be continued with that. But overall, I usually say that the first place to start is to just introduce more awareness around your mindset, like just to pay more attention, because just sort of like I was talking about before, when it comes to people wanting to change their lifestyles or start a diet or whatever it may be, and they only focus on the food and the exercise, like there's so much more to it when it comes to your mindset and how that can trip you up down the line or support you if you have it in the right spot. So, but how do we do that? You have to start by just like more attention. Typically I like to say like, don't even try to change your mindset right away. Just start to pay more attention to your mindset, because we can't really change or improve something that we don't even know needs changing or what needs improving. So that's where this idea of awareness comes in first. And a lot of people don't like to hear that, because they just want to like, as soon as they set their minds to something, it's like, no, I just want to do it now. Like I have the motivation, I have the momentum now. But my argument is, sure, you may have that now, but then what happens, just like last time, when you run into that challenge or that obstacle or the barrier, and then you just like, again, fall off the wagon. So that's where this stuff is really important. So just starting to pay more attention. A few things that, because people will say, okay, like pay attention to what though? Like how do I pay attention to my mindset? And a few that I like to share, I typically share these on podcasts and things like that, is a few different things. We might have talked about this on Clubhouse, I can't remember, but feedback, setbacks, and success are the big kind of areas you can start to just start there, just start to pay attention to how you respond to those things. So with feedback, that's essentially like the feedback that you're getting from friends, from family, from your boss, from your coworkers, from your significant other, things like that. How do you respond to that feedback, whether it's, constructive criticism or what have you? Like, what is your initial response? Is it like you go on the defense and try to like defend why you said or did what you did and why it's still correct and you don't necessarily need that feedback? Or do you feel like that person is like personally attacking you to some degree? That stuff is kind of indicative of a fixed mindset, where someone with a growth mindset would take feedback as sort of more information to improve, to get better, to grow, probably thank that person for their feedback, and then kind of like take that, introduce that into what they're doing to get better. The next one is setbacks. And I know we've talked about this already at length, so I don't need to dive into it a ton, but someone with a fixed mindset will take a step back and see that as evidence that they're not meant to do it, that they're not cut out for it, whatever. Someone with a growth mindset would take a step back and see it again as information to kind of reroute or do things differently. Maybe they need to pick a different strategy that'll work better for them, and then continue on. And then lastly, with success, the success of other people. So an example I like to use is, you're scrolling through Instagram, you may be on your own own like weight loss journey or health and fitness journey yourself, and you see someone talking about how they recently lost a ton of weight, or how they have this like magnificent like healthy lifestyle that you like so badly want to have. How do you feel when you see things like that, or you hear it from a friend or a coworker or something like that? Someone with a fixed mindset is more likely to see that and perceive the success of other people as something that they should be jealous of, or start to think of reasons and justifications for why that person can be successful, but they can't necessarily be successful. Oh, that person's lucky, or they have the right genetics and I don't. Versus someone with a growth mindset would almost see those things as like examples that they can be successful too. Like that person on Instagram or your friend or your coworker that has been successful in the areas that you want to be successful in. It's like, this is awesome because she is essentially a role model now that it's possible. And maybe I should ask her about how she did it. Maybe I should follow her, or start to just like pay attention to what my friend is doing and see if I can maybe mirror those behaviors or whatever it may be. It's just see it as like, this is cool because it shows that it's possible, and that means it's possible for me as well. So those are a couple big ones. So when you come across those situations, just start to pay attention and see which way your mindset kind of shifts, and don't necessarily try to change it. Again, just pay attention, and sometimes just paying attention is enough for you to start to work on shifting it. So those are just a few. There's a lot of different sort of situations that you can be in and how your growth versus fixed mindset may kind of show up. But yeah, so that's my first tip for changing, is to just start noticing and paying attention to where it is so that you can indeed change it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So really self-diagnosis is, don't want to call it a diagnosis, but I mean, basically you're trying to figure out what it is that, you're struggling with, and mindset could be a huge component of that, right? That's holding you back. So I think it's really interesting too. Like there are people out there like millionaire CEOs that have a growth mindset around like, being a leader and, providing a good business structure and hiring and employees. But then when it comes to weight loss, for some reason, they don't have that same growth mindset, right? Is that something that's pretty typical? Like people have a growth mindset in one thing, not another thing?
Yeah, it is very typical, which I think is interesting because the more I hear mindset in sort of like people's Instagram captions or blogs or whatever, it's typically talked about as like, oh, you have this overarching growth mindset that, you just have the growth mindset and that turns into every other area of your life. When in reality, your mindset is super domain specific. And so what I mean by that is that you can absolutely have a growth mindset about health and fitness and believe that you can change your health and fitness sort of lifestyle, or your ability to become a more fit individual, or change your eating behaviors. Like you may believe in those things. But even inside of that, some people may have a growth mindset about their healthy eating behaviors, but may have a fixed mindset about how strong they can get. So it's very, I guess, specific to the area. So for sure, I mean, in a clubhouse, we chatted with someone that was in a room probably like a month ago, and came in and he said, I have like a couple different businesses that I run. I feel like I have a really strong growth mindset about like always looking for ways to improve, and seeing like setbacks is like an opportunity to like shift our practices or like find holes in our systems and things like that. But he's like, when it comes to health and fitness, like I absolutely don't have a growth mindset for myself. Every time I try something, I feel like I can't stick with it. I'm getting to the point where I'm just going to give up and not try anything anymore. And he was like, what is going on here? Like, how is it possible that I can have such a strong like growth mindset in one area and fixed mindset in the other? And this was an awesome opportunity for me to explain that, to be honest, it's very normal, So I worry that people come across sort of this more broad definition of mindset and assume like, okay, well, clearly like I don't have a growth mindset because I have it over here, but I don't have it over here. So that must mean that I just don't have a growth mindset in general. And that's not the case. You absolutely have that growth mindset. It's just not necessarily like showing up in other areas of your life. So I think it's first and foremost important to understand that it's very normal to be that way. And there's nothing wrong with you. You're not like broken. But also can definitely change. Like just like honestly, that growth mindset in business could shift to a fixed mindset. Let's hope it doesn't. You can absolutely shift these other areas of your life from fixed to more growth oriented. Some ways to kind of do that is to pay attention to what makes you have a growth mindset in those areas that you already do. Like, why do you have that? Like, really think about that. Like, why do you believe in your ability to change, your business and continue to grow that? Like, was it the past experiences? Is it, where you were taught different things? Like, what allowed that to happen? And then think about on the flip side, when it comes to health and fitness, let's just kind of, for the sake of examples here, we can stick to these two different things. When it comes to health and fitness, if you have a fixed mindset there, like, why is that? Like, why is it the same? Like, past experiences, things you were taught? Like, why do you feel like you aren't able to change or figure out like what's going to work the best for you or continue to improve in that area? And start to kind of like lay out those things and then see where maybe you could potentially bring in some of those strengths on the growth mindset area, if that's business or otherwise, and bring that into your health and fitness goals. Like, what makes you successful there that could potentially kind of be brought over to the fixed mindset area. So that's health and fitness. So yeah, long story short, you can absolutely have a growth mindset in one area and fixed mindset in the other. And it's not, I do think, and I'm not sure we actually have specific research on this, and I'm like kicking myself for not doing this while I was in my PhD, but I do think if you ever start to like cultivate a growth mindset in one area, that can make it easier to bring it into other areas. If you start to, see yourself and sort of provide evidence to yourself and prove to yourself that you can change and get better in one area of your life, that does have an opportunity to bleed over into other areas. And I think we see that a lot in health and fitness. And I saw it myself, even when I first started getting into strength training and nutrition and things of that nature. I saw that dedication and like confidence in strength training and stuff like that brought over into other aspects of my life, whether it was like academics or, working on preparing for like big tests for graduate school and things like that. So I saw to myself, and I do think it makes sense just from like a mindset researcher perspective, that if you can start to prove to yourself that you can change broadly, that can be carried over into other areas. But like I said, we don't have specific research for that, but I don't see the harm in it either. If you start to believe like, oh, so I'm totally growth oriented over here, that means there's no reason I can't be growth oriented in this area as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, that does. And I love the translation over of like skills you've already built and things that you're really confident in to things maybe that you're not. And I find like, for the CEO guy example that you were providing, right? This guy obviously has a growth mindset in his businesses and his ability to be, a leader for a multitude of different companies, but not with his weight loss. So one thing like that he can maybe recognize, like he really wants to grow his company and be successful, but he probably also really wants to hit those health and fitness goals. So I'm wondering like, why is it that just wanting something really badly isn't enough to like make your mindset, put your mindset in a position to like just lose the weight and be successful, right?
Yeah, that's like the question that we need to solve for everything ever.
Yeah.
When I actually went to grad school to sort of answer this question of like, people know they should, eat healthy, exercise, do those things, but so many people aren't doing it. However, so many of those people want to be doing it. So what is going on here? I can't say that I've exactly solved that question yet or have a great answer to it. But essentially the wanting or, having intentions to do something is obviously, as we all know, not the same as actually acting on it or changing behaviors or working towards something. And we actually see this in the research as the intention behavior gap. So you have the intentions, desires, the wants, all of those things, but there is a gap oftentimes between that and actually acting on it or trying to shift your behaviors or putting those desires and intention and wants into action. So like, why is that, right? And there's a lot of different things here. And I think for the most part, you need to have that still. The intention, the want, the desire, like that is still required, but it's not sufficient for behavior change. And that's where having like a growth mindset is almost sort of a bridge between the want and the action. Because if you are sitting over here like, I want to do these things, I have full intention to do them, but your fixed mindset is kind of like sitting in the back of your mind and just a little bit of like, I don't really believe I can change though. I don't really believe I can do it. I tried other things in the past and they didn't work, so there's a good chance this isn't going to work too. Like that's always going to hold you back from actually making your way over to the behavior change or like taking action or sticking with those actions. So mindset is a big part of that bridge. There's a lot of other things too, just like overall we can call it motivation. Like where are you getting that from? Is it coming from like a place of sort of like external to yourself, like you're doing it for an event or because someone else told you that you were that looks like you have gained weight or something like that? Are you doing it because it makes you feel good because it's like best for like your long-term health and things like that? And that's the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And like so many other factors to this, whether it's like your social environment, what your habits look like. But I do think a lot of times it comes back down to just like your overall like mindset and where you believe that you can go or don't believe that you can go. So that's why I think just like wanting something is not necessarily enough. And we've seen it over and over again in the research. I think we know it pretty much at face value that that's not quite sufficient. But yeah, I hope that somewhat answered your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's super interesting. Do you think like it's a delayed gratification thing for people? Like they see that they know that they need to lose, 30 pounds and they just see that as so far away that like they don't even begin to start wrapping their head around the fact that they could do it?
Yeah, and as humans, we typically go for the instant gratification. It's sort of in our hardwired system to go for like what makes us feel good in the moment. It's almost like a survival mechanism that we don't necessarily need anymore, but we still have. So it's like, what's going to make us feel good right now? What's going to protect us right now? A lot of times with like food, it's like, okay, in, caveman, cavewoman days, food might be scarce. So it's like, if there's food now, like eat it now because you never know when you're going to have it again. When in reality, food is pretty abundant these days. Of course, depending on like where you live in the world and your situation, but we're definitely in a different position now than we were, hundreds of thousands of years ago. So with that that said, you have to sort of like fight against these old systems that we're hardwired for. And we do have newer systems, things like deliberate decision making and self-control and things like that have definitely developed over time. But it's quite literally in a different part of our brain. So we're fighting against this previous system with this new system. And a lot of times self-control loses against this old concrete hardware that we've had for so long. So I definitely think that that's a part of it, that we often fall for the instant gratification instead of holding out for the long-term reward. So that's where, like different tools can be helpful here, and just like setting like smaller goals, not only focusing on that long-term outcome or focusing on like process-oriented goals or mastery-oriented goals versus just like performance or trying to like seek that, goal that may be like 6 months down the line and just envisioning that all the time. Like we need to really work on battling some of these in the moment situations versus always focusing on that long-term outcome, which I think is a little bit counterintuitive for some, because a lot of times what we see is, write your big goal on a sticky note and put it somewhere so you can always see it, and like make it your phone background or whatever it may be. But if we're always only focusing on that long-term goal, sure, sometimes it might help us to like remind us of the thing that we want, to like push through situations that we need to maybe go past that instant gratification and bring up self-control or something like that. But in reality, just focusing on that long-term goal is not really that great of a process to work towards it. Like we need to like reverse engineer and think about all of like the little things that are going to come up, all of those self-control like issues that we might run into, and plan for it and prepare for it and get better at it and practice it over time, which is not usually what people want to hear or want to do. They just want to envision that like happy outcome that they're searching for, which is a lot more comfortable. But as I say all of the time, discomfort breeds growth. So we have to kind of go through those uncomfortable situations, practice, course correct, all of that in order to get there, and honestly accept that is going to be the path.
Yeah. This is fascinating because I wonder, like, okay, so we have like specific genes that, or epigenetic changes, whatever it might be, over the course of a lifetime or from our grandparents that we've inherited, right? And they might be associated with a higher risk of obesity, for example, like the FTO gene is directly related to obesity, and whether someone could, has the potential to be at a low, and you can always change your genetics epigenetically based on your interactions with the environment, right? We do some DNA testing at CBG where we use this information, nutrigenomics, to try to help people make better decisions about their eating and, figure out what foods that their body really is in tune with and that they need. And I'm wondering if there are also some mindset, genes specifically, and the prevalence of those genes that have been identified, maybe associated with like dopamine or something like that. I'm not sure. Do you know anything about sort of this genetic component of a growth mindset, or just mindset in general?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything out there like that. Because like you said, interesting about like a genetic talk around mindset though, because what we often use in the research to sort of simulate a fixed mindset, and it's easy to change people's mindsets short term, like in a lab setting. Like you literally can have someone just read an article one way or the other, and they might start to shift their mindset a little bit. No, not really sure that it would hold for a long period of time, but we often have them read articles about genetics, like, oh, if you have a genetic predisposition to gain weight, or you can only gain so much strength, or whatever it may be, sort of in the health and fitness realm, like that's enough to make them think like, okay, to have a fixed mindset, like people see genetics as fixed, like inherently. So if they believe that, oh, like you have to have a certain type of like gene or genetic profile in order to like lose weight easily or build muscle easily or whatever, then they might start to think like, oh, well then I can't, I'm not gonna be able to lose weight. I'm not gonna be able to gain the amount of muscle that I want. And the sad part is that leads typically to people just like putting in less effort, and then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in that case. It's like, yep, now you don't lose the weight or gain the muscle because you didn't think you were able to do it, so you didn't put effort for it. When in reality, you probably could have, but you just decided not to. So to answer your question, I don't know. We have any research on like actual like genetic predispositions for growth versus fixed mindset. And I think so much of it is, here we're talking about nature versus nurture. So much of it is nurture, and what our environment like teaches us, what we teach ourselves, what we believe in ourselves or don't. And that's really what makes up your growth versus fixed mindset. However, we do know when it comes to like neuroscience, that area of your brain that is more so like where growth mindset lives, for lack of a better term. And it's very similar to like the same areas of like where people will pay attention to like error processing. So if like something goes wrong and it needs fixed, or attention and focus, or same kind of with self-control and like deliberate decision making, like your growth mindset is sort of attached to all of those things, which makes sense to some degree. But it's interesting because then it makes me think, is there research out there, which I don't think there is, but would be very cool to see, if like growth mindset and self-control and self-regulation are very much so tied, or your ability to like have like stronger focus or attention on things, which would make sense if they're in sort of the same area of the brain. But yeah, as far as genetics go, not sure there's anything out there that would be really cool to see, but I also would be worried. I almost don't want this research to happen, because if we were to find, that there's a growth mindset gene, everyone who doesn't have that would have a fixed mindset about their ability to have a growth mindset. So like, let's just leave that alone, maybe.
I see what you mean. Yeah, with this nutrigenomic stuff that's coming out, and obviously the human genome was only the full human genome was only sequenced like in the early 2000s. So like, it's still like emerging science, right? But like the same thing with the obesity, some of the genes recognized as obesity genes, like the FTO gene and other things, like, do we even want people to know
Right.
that they have that, right? Because then they already, put themselves in this box, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they're not able to sort of get out of, right? So I think it's important. I like the connection you made with like DNA and what we're born with as being sort of the fixed mindset component, and then the epigenetic and our actions, desires, and other things that we interact with on a daily basis could be sort of almost synonymous to the growth mindset and how we can change our DNA to be in our favor for whatever it is that our goals really are, right? So yeah, I like that. And I think, we're getting into some scary stuff if we start determining like, hey, like you're predisposed to not really have a growth mindset around things that you want to do, right? Which is pretty crazy. But I think, either way, people can reach their goals, and they can do it with a coach or they can do it with a program. It's just a matter of determining, what it is that they want to do. They have to be ready to make the change and then start taking actionable steps to get there. So you currently are doing one-on-one coaching, but you also have like a course that can sort of help people navigate through these sort of things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. It's not necessarily for, and I know we talked about this prior to hitting record, but not necessarily for like clients. So I do have a one-on-one coaching side of my business, and that is very much so, like mindset is very much so interlaced into our health and fitness like coaching practices. But when it comes to actually learning sort of like how to cultivate a growth mindset, I do have a program for coaches to help their own clients with. So that is the Health Mindset Coaching Certification. It is about 13 weeks long. It is, the word accredited is not correct, but I am CEU, Continuing Education Unit, provider approved for NASM, AFAA, and I am working on ACE currently. So it's one of those things where you can get some continuing education credits as well. So this program essentially walks through the foundations of psychological theories of health behavior change, growth versus fixed mindset, kind of like understanding those foundational things about cultivating a growth mindset and helping people change, and then dives into like a lot of the fun stuff that I think most coaches are interested in learning more about, which is like motivation, self-control, stress, habit formation, goal setting, those kind of areas, and then also how to then take all of this information and create your own coaching framework, or how to sort of introduce it into your current coaching practices to make your coaching better, to help people be more adherent, retain them for maybe longer, and ultimately be more successful. So sort of like takes you from point A of just like understanding basic behavior change to point Z, which would be like actually introducing all of this stuff into your current coaching practices. So very tangible, not just sort of like, oh, I'm going to lecture you for 13 weeks, but also like, how do we put this into your coaching practices?
I love that. Yeah. And it's something that I need to consider for myself and my coaching, just growing as a coach in general. I think other coaches too, right? Because it has like the component of like you building a growth mindset around being a coach. And then also as you building the skills necessary to help your clients also establish a growth mindset and like help people with the mindset component, as we've been talking about this entire time, is super important for people. And it's definitely something that's emerging. It's exciting. And I think it's going to be sort of, something that's almost required of a coach in the next, 5 to 10 years, maybe even thanking COVID-19 for the fact that people need to have more empathy around like, because you have like these tough love coaches out there. I'm one of them. I'm like, look, this is what you need to do. This is what the science says. This is how you do it. And then if people come back and don't, it shouldn't always necessarily be looked at, hey, this is a failure. It should be like, this is an opportunity to grow. And I think that that's one of the key components of mindset and what we can do to further help clients,
Yeah, definitely. And it is something that is just generally left out from other certifications, which is why I am provider approved by some of these larger governing bodies like NASM, is because they don't have it. It's not part of their general programming. So otherwise they'd be like, no, we already teach this. We don't need you. So it is definitely left out. There is a huge gap when it comes to teaching psychology, health, behavior change, and mindset to coaches. And my argument, and I think a lot of people would understand this, is that sure, the things like nutrition and exercise programming and things like that are very important and definitely necessary if you want to be a health and fitness coach, but you're gonna have a really hard time helping people actually implement those things into their lives if you don't have these communication, behavior change, like mindset understandings in order to help them do that. Like, you're just gonna keep running into walls. You're gonna have clients who stay for 3 months and then leave, and you have to continue to, get more clients over and and over again, and no one wants to do that. Of course, we don't need to work and shouldn't need to work with our clients for forever. The idea is that we're setting them up for success to do this on their own. But a lot of times we lose clients early on, not because they're ready to go do things themselves, but because they're so frustrated with the process and not being able to stick to things. So that's where I think overall, like the health and fitness like certification realm has been doing coaches a disservice, is by not teaching them a lot of these concepts. So that's exactly why I have the certification in the first place. And clearly very passionate about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I love that this certification is sort of bridging the gap for getting people to believe in themselves and that they can do it. And then as coaches, we already know how to help people lose the weight if we can get them to follow and adhere to a program and believe in themselves. So I love this bridging the gap. A lot of clients and a lot of coaches need help with this. So yeah, I think that it's amazing. So look, guys, go over to Kasey's stuff. She's gonna tell us where you can find all these programs, I'm assuming, because I'm sure everybody's going to be interested in finding all this stuff and learning more about you. So where can people find you at?
Yeah. So as far as social media goes, I spend most of my time on Instagram. I'm Coachkaseyjo there. I do have a TikTok. It's not that great, but I'm trying. That's also Coachkaseyjo. As we sort of alluded to and mentioned a couple times, I'm on Clubhouse too, also Coachkaseyjo. I think I'm on Pinterest as well. It's Coachkaseyjo, of course, everywhere. So yeah, if you're interested in social media channels, Instagram's probably going to be your best bet, at least to start. You can always reach out to me there via direct message. I also have a solid website with lots of information there. You can find other podcast episodes if you want to hear more from me there, or just learn more about all of these different programs that I have. And that's kjocoaching.com. So KJO Coaching is my business. We also have a personal Instagram for that too. If you're interested in following that page, lots of information there. Us four coaches post pretty frequently, just mostly education and mindset based stuff. But yeah, those are kind of like the main avenues to chat with me.
I love it. Yeah, Coachkaseyjo killed it today. This was excellent podcast. Thanks for coming on today. Look, guys, go find Kasey if you're interested in more information about mentality and mindset. And then also, if you want to join our free Facebook page, make sure you go to the link in our show notes today to join that. And Kasey, it's been a pleasure today to chat with you, and we will talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thanks, Kasey. Bye.
Bye.
It's science.
Thank you for listening to the podcast today. We hope you enjoyed it. Keep tuning in every week for more incredible guests and ways to reach your max potential, both physically and mentally. Please subscribe on iTunes or your preferred podcast app and let us know if you liked this episode.
Science.
Don't forget to check us out at consistencybreedsgrowth.com or on Instagram at CBG_online_sports for details on upcoming nutrition challenges or one-on-one coaching for weight loss, wellness, or performance. Also, feel free to join our free Facebook page at www.facebook.com/groups/CBG Nutrition Tribe.